Regardless of the goals of your organization, regardless of whether you finished first place or last in the previous season, the draft is going to be the backbone of your talent. You're going to acquire a vast majority of the players in your organization through the draft, or at least players that you're going to use to acquire other players through trades. And there's a lot of good players in the draft, but it's incredibly important to make sure that you're getting it right because there is so much potential to improve your organization as a whole and yet so much room to fall behind everybody else as well. So today we're going to be covering the draft, what you want to be doing, and essentially how you can optimize your approach to get the best results possible out of your drafted players. So the first thing we're going to talk about is looking at the pool before the draft. Now I have 100% accuracy on for the sake of simplicity here, but we're going to assume that we're a few weeks before the draft, which is generally when I'd recommend taking your first look at the pool. And I would recommend, just as a starter, sorting by overall potential to get an idea of who the top players in the draft are going to be. You can take a look at the mock draft to see who's likely going to be taken towards the upper tiers of the draft. So we see here, this is a very pitcher heavy draft, and you're going to see this a lot in OTP. It does like to generate its star hitters in the international amateurs, and it likes to generate star pitchers in the draft. So do not be surprised if you see a very pitcher heavy class year after year after year. We got a couple of interesting players towards the top of the draft, and as we go through, I'm going to talk about certain traits that I like or dislike about them. So Bobby Brown, first thing I noticed when I opened his profile, he's a three-pitch guy. Now, he does have the optimal three pitch profile, sinker, slider, changeup. If I have to take a three pitch pitcher, it's going to be sinker, slider, changeup. But he's also an 18-year-old, pretty old 18-year-old with a 20 overall changeup, which is going to be a little bit risky to develop. Now, I don't think that changeups are nearly as risky as most of the community seems to, but I'm still a little bit scared by a three pitch pitcher with a really low grade changeup and a really low grade slider at that. If his stuff slips, he's not really going to be all that great. The control is probably not going to get too far above average if it even hits that point. The movement is excellent. He's an extreme ground baller, solid stamina. But overall, I think that there's a lot of room for this guy to fall, so he's going to be an absolute must avoid for me in the draft. Chris Ferguson. Now, there's another 2070 changeup, but this is a very different 2070 changeup. It's coming in a four pitch pitcher's mix, and he's got much stronger control. Stamina is still good. That work ethic is also very encouraging for the potential development of that changeup along with everything else on his profile. I like the forkball and the slider. Those will help to keep the home runs a little bit low. The above average movement and strong control are going to play up nicely as well with a great four pitch mix, giving him very solid stuff. This is a guy I'd be potentially interested in drafting with my first pick, so I'll shortlist him for now. And by the way, I'm going to note that while I do have scouting accuracy at 100%, if these players are not very high accuracy, you may want to consider scouting them so you do have a better idea of what you're looking at. Next up, we got Chris Jones, and looky there, it's another 20 changeup in a three-pitch pitcher mix. I'm literally just going to ignore all of these guys going forwards, especially with bad personalities, because the odds that they develop are just much lower than other players, like, for example, Chris Ferguson, when the upside is about the same. So I don't want to take that risk with my first round pick when I have very safe, well, much more safe, relatively speaking, options. All right, we've got Mike Loveland here. He's a little bit older, but he's also got a really nice personality. The work ethic intelligence combo is going to be great for development, and he does have that changeup with a three pitch mix. The changeup is more developed, but again, these three pitch pitchers, if anything goes wrong with them, they're either going to be bullpen pieces or just completely unusable. So this is a type of player I'm just going to continue to avoid. Alexis Mora. This is a three pitch guy that's a little bit more tempting to me because of his exceptional movement. In these games, you're going to see the really high importance of stuff and movement, as catcher ability will help you limit your walks no matter really where your control is, and a lot of home runs are going to be on the table, so getting that movement up to those really high levels to kind of eliminate that threat for the most part to your pitchers and optimizing the amount of strikeouts you can get, guaranteed outs, that's going to be big. I'm still not really liking this guy, again, because we've got better options with a four pitch pitcher, a much more safe bet to develop, but he is very interesting to me. And were I a little bit shorter on starting pitching options, this could be a guy I'd consider taking in the first round. Jake Seavick, and this is probably one of my favorite options. I like the four pitch mix. It's pretty well balanced. Again, the changeup's a little risky, but he's also very young for the draft class. He's got that high work ethic, and the changeup's not super critical to his development. The movement and control are above average, and I think he's just solid. He's about as good as Chris Ferguson, in my opinion. Jeff Wilson. He's a more developed pitcher, a college pitcher, I believe, but the changeup is still underdeveloped. In this guy's profile, though, it's probably the least important pitch. I like that he's much more developed than everybody else. The movement and control are about the same. The upside's probably a little lower than those other two pitchers, but the downside is also much higher. So he's a guy I could potentially see myself taking as more of a safe target. Bobby DeGroot. This is actually a type of player I like quite a bit. The above average movement, solid control, and balanced four pitch mix, well developed, solid movement, stamina rather. The leader is also nice. I'm just going to throw him on the short list. And personality, I cannot overstate how big it is in the draft. It's going to not only impact your player's development, but every other player in your organization. Now, this is a really weird profile because if that changeup does not come along, this guy is not going to work, even though he has a four pitch mix, because the curveball is essentially a non factor for his stuff, and the changeup is by far his best pitch. So I'm going to shortlist him as a potential option. Yeah, even with the low changeup right now, because I do like the high work ethic. I think that gives him a little bit better shot, but he's risky to me, and I wouldn't go for him if there were any better options. And this is my favorite pitcher so far in the draft. I love that high intelligence. That's going to give him a better opportunity for TCRs. The slider changeup combination is going to be devastating for the high strikeout rate. The control, really nice. You love to see that. He's not going to give up very many free passes at all. Solid movement to go along with it. The knuckle curve and fastball are nice additions to this profile as well. The changeup's a little more developed, so I'm not too underconfident in his development. And this is just a pitcher I like a whole lot. Now, I think we talked about starting pitchers plenty. You kind of get the idea. More pitches are better. You don't like the underdeveloped changeup when it's critical to the pitcher's overall profile. You don't want to take any unnecessary risks. You love to see that higher movement and control. Those are things that we're actually going to talk about a little bit more in a bit. But now we're going to move on to relief pitchers, and I can't overstate how valuable drafting relievers are. The AI is going to pass on them. Now, if you have a higher first round pick or you have a deeper draft class, these should probably not be your priority since you could still get meaningful starting pitchers or position players who could make a solid impact in the major leagues. But once you get past those guys, the relievers are going to be left on the board and you can get some really meaningful talent. This guy would be a top tier reliever in the league right now. His work ethic and already pretty solid development gives me good hope. The changeup is a little scary, but at 35 overall, I'm not too worried about it. I think this is a guy that could be extremely valuable. Perhaps 1.5 wins at very high caliber performance in critical situations. That's something you really want to see from your relievers. So he will be thrown on the short list as well. Now we're going to talk about the hitters in the draft. As I've said, drafts are pretty pitcher heavy, but there are still some top tier hitters. This is a guy, Dan Nance, who could be an MVP candidate in the majors. He's got solid defense, above average in a corner, possibly, or around average, maybe. He could probably play first base with his 6'6" profile and above 20 range and error for the infield. But really, what's going to carry him is no doubt the bat. The power is just going to be exceptional. He's going to draw plenty of walks, so the OPS is going to be ridiculous. The avoid Ks is solid. And the contact is high enough that you're not going to be too worried about the BABIP being low. This is a guy that I think has a ridiculous ceiling. He's relatively well developed, and the defense is solid. All of those things are awesome. I'm throwing him on the short list. Absolutely one of my favorite players in the draft. David Brown. He can kind of play third base. I'm not really liking it too much. He's okay in the outfield. The bat's okay. He's above average in the power department. He's not what we got from Dan Nance, but he's certainly interesting. I think he's going to go between our first pick and our second pick, and I don't really have an interest in him when we've got really good pitchers on the board, but he's something. And Eric Dufus, he's a decent hitter. He's a decent fielder, but that personality just turns me off immediately. The low intelligence and work ethic basically guarantees that he's not going to reach his potential, which is really critical for a young player with a lot of room to grow. I just cannot bring myself to take a player with personality that bad that early. Jordan Aguilar, really relying on that power. I'm not too big on that. Pat Brannon, I like the intelligence. I'm not a fan of the defense, but a solid hitter. This is a guy who could be impactful at the majors, probably first base or a DH spot. But he's interesting. We'll throw him on the short list as a possible second rounder. Jim Griffin, a leader and loyal, not great defense, hitting for an early pick. I don't like him enough to take him early. Ben Leviscu, he's got interesting infield defense. It looks like he's got some outfield as well. Yep, those are both solid. I like the versatility. The bat is above average overall. BABIP's going to be a little low, but I think between his ability to play just about anywhere competently and hit pretty well, I think he's valuable enough to be shortlisted. Another guy who's very power reliant, I don't want to go with that, and another guy who's power reliant. Now, the defense and the reliance on power, especially gap power, to power a player's offensive output is going to make me not too happy. I'm looking for guys who can get on base. That's how you score runs. And I'm looking for guys who are not going to be blunderous fielders. So now we've taken a look at the best players in the draft. That's just your first pre-draft option. Now we want to take a look at the most interesting players in the draft. Who's really going to stand out on page? And we see Alexis Mora here with ridiculously high movement compared to everybody else. Only a few 65 grade potential movement. Pat Rowell really standing out on that list. We'll get to him in a minute. But yeah, I think even with 3 pitches, that level of dominance compared to the rest of the draft class is going to warrant him a short list at this point. He's got higher movement, he's got higher stuff than just about every comparable pitcher. So even with the risky 3-pitch mix, there's no changeup to be particularly worried about. That slider gives him big upside. I like it enough that I'll throw him on. Bobby Brown, another 5-star pitcher, another 3-pitch guy. I think the downfall is just so high at this point that I can't risk taking him. If he was 17, maybe I'd consider, but I don't think he's going to be at the top of my list. Now you're going to see a lot of these types of guys, starting pitchers who have really low overall ratings despite ridiculous stuff, movement, and control. It's because they're relievers. John Caba here, great triple combo, but he's going to play terribly because he is a 2-pitch pitcher. Now, if you do set him as a reliever, he's going to be a lockdown guy all of a sudden. So you want to shortlist players like this, try to grab them in the middle rounds, and you can really bolster your bullpen with some higher stamina, high caliber pitchers. Pat Knight, another example of this. Just the same thing here, probably a little less good than Caba, but same deal. Luis Olvera, same thing. I love the work ethic intelligence combo. It's going to give him great potential, great room to grow. And we've got Pat Powell, who's probably the best of this group. He's got that work ethic as well, and he's actually a two-way player we see here. He's got actually solid outfield ratings. Like, this could handle right field. I'm not a fan of him at third base, but if you really needed him there, and first base certainly manageable for him. And the hitting is actually among the best in the draft. So I'm not sure where he's going to end up long term. He could possibly make it as a hitter. He could possibly make it as a pitcher. We're going to throw him on the short list because his ability to do either is really intriguing me. And he could be a potential second round selection for us. Now, Jorge Rivera, this is the type of pitcher that we're trying to nail by doing these sorting the most. He is a low overall pitcher. He's got 3 pitches. None of them particularly stand out. You do like to see that he's got a slider, though. That's going to boost his strikeout rate. The control's not great, but the movement is outstanding. This is a guy who can work at the back of your rotation and be really successful. He's not going to give up too many home runs, and with a strong defense behind him, a good catcher ability catcher, he's going to put up some pretty strong seasons. So he could be a possible sleeper pick if you get him a little bit further into the draft. Oh, interesting. You're going to see these guys every now and then, a 1-pitch sinker baller. They actually can work as relievers. The sinker works as like a mini knuckleball where it gives you less punishment for having no other pitches, but not a starting pitcher at all. So we got Chris Blocker here, and honestly, This guy might be my favorite pitcher in the draft. I absolutely love that his stuff movement and control are all plus. He's got a 5 pitch mix, not 4, but 5. Fastball, curveball, slider, changeup, splitter. Lots of pitches I like. I love the movement. I mean, I honestly just could rave about this guy for a long time. Awesome player. Plus, he's a hitter who has great infield defense and solid outfield defense. I don't think he's necessarily a two-way guy, but he can certainly back up like second base, maybe third base if you need him there. He's going to win Gold Gloves as a pitcher, no doubt about that. Plus, he's a college pitcher and he's pretty darn well developed. I really like this guy. He's probably my first choice in the draft at this point, honestly. I'm really liking him. All right, there we've got a reliever, and we've got Sean Connolly, a 3 pitch pitcher with really solid stuff movement and control, but a really risky changeup. It's 25 overall. He's 22, and he doesn't have that high work ethic to boost it. I still think the potential is worth throwing him on the short list. He's not a first-round pick, but if he slips to the second or third round, this is a guy we might consider just because the upside is so high. And Devin Coet, we were talking earlier about how Jorge Rivera looks awesome and could be a great sleeper pick back of the rotation starter. Devin Coet could be a mid-rotation starter if he reaches his potential, and basically the same type of sleeper pick. Movement's a little lower, but the stuff's higher and the control's much higher. That 60 control movement combo with a great defense is going to make it really easy to put up 3.5 ERA seasons. Fastball, cutter, changeup combo. Again, the changeup's a little risky, but he can probably make it as a reliever if it doesn't come around. He just looks like a really strong pitcher to me. Great potential as a starter. These 3 pitch guys with weaker stuff can really be slept on and can really make your organization that back of the rotation type of stuff that you are looking for. All right, Chris Fitzgerald. Here's another great example and a two-way player again. We've got, again, that average stuff, but really strong movement and actually even better control with the leader ability to go with it. He's got even better stamina than the previous guys. Sinker, cutter, curveball. So it's a solid 3 pitch mix. He can certainly make it as a back rotation starter. He's not going to dominate anybody, but he's going to be effective, especially with a good defense. And as a two-way player, his potential is a little higher. His infield defense is going to make him a Gold Glove pitcher. I mean, that's not a big thing to consider, but it's certainly nice to have that extra little boost to his performance. And the offensive potential is not bad. He could certainly be a backup at like second base in an emergency, probably first base more likely and more frequently. That's just a little extra value to him. All right, we got Sean Hollister. That changeup doesn't make me want to shortlist him as a top potential pick. Joel Hicks. This is a guy I like. The circle change makes him a little risky, but he is a 17-year-old, a younger 17-year-old with high work ethic. That gives him a much better chance of hitting that circle change's full potential. And when you're talking about a 3-star potential pitcher, this is a guy who's probably going in like the third or fourth round maybe in this draft class. And his overall potential is certainly a mid-rotation starter. He's got the stuff to succeed at a higher level than the guys we were talking about earlier, and the movement and control are still great. So that's a guy I'm really liking. All right, we've got Dan McLeod, all about the slider here. It's a little bit risky, and I don't like players who are so dependent on one pitch this early in the draft. I'll still shortlist him because, especially with great sliders, you can see some awesome performance. But I don't want to put too much stock into him. And here we have a catcher who can pitch, Chris Martin. Fastball changeup combination. That's interesting. I don't actually like him as a catcher or as a pitcher, ironically. I think that is a little bit funny, though. Jose Marino. Man, another great 3-star potential pitcher. These are the types of players that are really going to make your draft awesome. He does have that changeup, which is a little bit risky, but the fully developed forkball gives him a solid floor to work with. And the changeup's not too big in this profile, honestly. The splitter can help make up for an underdeveloped changeup. I love the movement and control potential. Just a great upside pick right there. We've got this guy's 4 stars, so we're going to ignore him. Joe Van Hove, another great example of those 3-star potential undervalued pitchers. And I would recommend going through with stuff movement and control, just getting an idea of who the strongest players are at each position, or relatively for each category. And then we're going to go to hitters. Let's check out batting potential. And also, as you saw some guys who hit who are actually pitchers, do not recommend sorting by all batters or all pitchers. You want to catch those two-way guys who might be more effective the other way. Now, Chris Martin, I say I don't like him as a catcher or as a pitcher, but he is actually one of the best hitters in this draft. Very solid avoid Ks and contact abilities. He's not going to make it as a catcher. The defense is just not there, but he could be a great first baseman with 35 range and error and 6'4". So we'll throw him on the short list as a possible middle round pick because of that ability to be a strong hitter. Okay, this is a type of player I actually like a lot. Nestor Carrillo. The defense is very Wander Franco-esque, so while he's not a shortstop by any means, he could be a strong third baseman. And the outfield defense isn't bad either, but in addition to his great third base defense, you've got a solid hitting profile here. Not much power, but he'll get on base and he'll give you some gap to go with it. So if you don't really have a great third base option, this guy could absolutely step in as a solid player for you. All right, we've got Eric Doofus. He's the guy we saw earlier, the aptly named Eric Doofus. We'll try to look at some of the lower potential players. All right, I don't like that first baseman. The eye is a little bit too low for me. Okay, how about Andy Donahue? He's interesting, but I don't love him too much. This is kind of a weaker hitting class, but that's generally the trend. Um, with these, just generally with OATP, you're going to see weaker hitting classes. We already talked about Pat Powell, the reliever who's a two-way sensation. He actually is one of the better hitters in this class, and this is another reason you want to sort by hitting potential, because if you went through the pitchers and didn't notice Pat Powell as a hitter, you go through and you see him here. Chris Fitzgerald, same deal. We saw that he was an interesting possible backup guy, which adds to his value. Now he comes up as one of the better hitters in the class when you sort by hitting potential. All right, let's see if there's any higher I players. Obviously, there's Dan Nance. He's easily the best hitter in this class. Chris Blocker, who we also talked about as a two-way player. I don't think he's a great hitter, but he's certainly solid as a backup or something. We got Reese Craddy. Not a fan of him, honestly. Not the best potential. John Jones, this guy's okay as a later round pick just because the hitting potential across the board is decent enough that he could potentially sneak into a decent trade chip type of conversation. Don't like those higher overall players. They're certainly not going to be worth drafting. We've seen so many dominant pitchers that just doesn't really make sense to draft hitters early over them. I like this David Ramos guy, and if he falls far enough, he could be potentially a solid pickup for us. And that's really it for the hitters. They're just, as I expected, just not that many super interesting options. We're going to pretty much be drafting pitchers. Now, another thing I strongly recommend doing is looking at who the best fielders in each draft class are, because you could still get some stronger defensive players with a little bit of TCR luck who can transform into solid everyday players at critical positions. So, for example, catcher ability. I don't really see any strong catcher ability guys, but I see like Sam Barbetti. He's got a decent personality, solid defense overall. The hitting's not terrible. Maybe a backup someday. We draft him in like the 20th round. There's no downside to that. Sam Cameron, same deal. Just a little bit of potential to maybe crack the majors as a backup. And you're going to take a look at all of these guys. I actually think Nathan Webb's probably the best that we've seen so far. Love that personality. And see guys who could potentially be like utility guys or backups or even potentially everyday players. Chris Clement, really love him. He's set as an outfielder, but he's really more of an infielder. Worst case, he's a super utility guy. I think he could potentially make it as a second baseman with some TCR. Alex Duran, possibly the best fielding profile in the draft, an excellent personality. This is what you love to see. The offense isn't even that bad. This is a guy who could easily TCR into a decent everyday shortstop. Ricky Escobedo, I think the hitting's actually fine on him. With a little bit of luck, he could be a second baseman, third baseman maybe. You like to see the defense strong. Pat Lee, same deal. He's a decent hitter overall already with a pretty strong defensive profile. Mike Mosqueda, if he's going to make it, it's got to be as a second baseman. But again, that personality is just way too good to pass up on. Leader, work ethic, intelligence, that's the holy trinity right there. Those are really going to help your guys develop. Mike Raines, now this is the best fielder in the draft, could easily become a utility infielder with his decent bat and great defense. Love the work ethic. He's got the possibility to pass his potential. You love to see it. Willis Ruiz, here's another outstanding fielder with a decent bat. He could absolutely be a utility guy as well. Awesome third base defense. Really strong shortstop defense, too, in my opinion. And very strong outfield arm, although he's never really going to get the chance to use it because the range is terrible. Now, for outfield range, I'm particularly looking at these 75 guys. Love Mike Baker. Great arm to go with his range. That's going to play up a little bit. The work ethic is good. The bat is not bad. It's this type of player that's really going to be the best type to target in drafts, especially in the middle rounds, because these guys can be impactful players in your organization. And it's just easy to sleep on them because the defense is the standout tool. You're not looking for a great hitter. Their overalls are probably not going to spike off the page. Now, I love this guy despite the bad personality, but this is really damaging to his value. This is a guy with a decent bat and great range. He could be at worst a utility outfielder. I think he genuinely has that potential, but the personality does make it less likely he gets there. This is still a guy I'd be happy to spend an 8th to 10th round pick on just for that overall potential. And I will, of course, take a look at these guys who are 70 range, but for the outfielders, it's really the 80 range that's going to be big. I do like this guy, solid hitter with good overall range. Love the base running, too. That's going to be a nice level of production as well. Ricky Rel's another possible utility outfielder. He's got infield ratings too. Not good ones though. I wouldn't play him in the infield. Mike Lamb, not bad, but the personality does not make me happy. Okay, Nicholas Fierros is actually an average batter across the board with decent outfield defense and not terrible infield defense. All right, and now our pre-draft is done. Again, you're going to see some of the guys that you might be on the border for an early round selection, and then send scouting reports just to make sure you've got the right idea of what you're looking at. Now we're going to go to the draft itself. And the first thing you're going to do is just go click the auto draft until you're picked. There's nothing you can do about the selections made before you, just you have to live with it. So first overall, Jake Sevick, one of the pitchers I liked the best. That's unfortunate. Dan Nance goes second overall. He was certainly a player I was hoping we would have the option to select, but he will be gone. Jeff Wilson, another great pitcher selected early. Mike Loveland, this is a very risky selection. The personality will help offset that risk a little bit, but that changeup is really going to be the focal point of this guy's development. And Chris Jones will go third overall. This is another risky selection, in my opinion. All right, so the good news is Chris Ferguson's still available. Bobby Brown is still available. I'm not really a huge Bobby Brown fan, but Alexis Mora is still available. DeGroot is still available. Honestly, I think this one is going to come down to, do I select Pat Blocker or do I select Alexis Mora? I think it's got to be Pat Blocker. Or Chris Blocker, excuse me. This is just by far the best player in the draft, in my opinion. I love the well-rounded pitching. I love that he can provide value as a hitter if I need him to. There's a chance he slips to the second round, but with a well-developed college pitcher, minimal risk, and all that potential, I just can't pass on a player like this. Now, I'm going to meet his demand straight out. Actually, I'll just draft him. We'll talk about negotiations after the draft. But you're going to notice that another little bonus about this, his demand is only $2.5 million, while the recommended slot is $5.5 million. So I can save less than half the slot signing Chris Blocker that early in the draft. So we see that a lot of the top starting pitchers are all gone. Blocker almost certainly would have been drafted in that time as well. We see a huge run on pitching. Then David Brown, the third baseman, who was rated pretty well. Yeah, Alexis Moore went right after us. And then Bobby Brown right after him. Ferguson immediately. You just see the AI will go after these top tier pitchers very quickly as well. All right, and now we're going to have to see who we've got left at this point. We've still got Brad Horde, who's the best player listed as a reliever. Let's quickly just filter by our short list to see if we've got any players that we had our eyes on that we're particularly interested in here. So Joel Hicks is the 3-star pitcher that's still left. It looks like a lot of the other 3-star pitchers have been selected by this point, sadly, but he is still available, and he's probably the best player left on the draft board at this point, honestly. The risk is certainly substantial with this guy, but the upside is also very substantial. He's a player I could see as a mid-rotation starter. That's pretty significant. We're going to draft him for sure. All right, a lot of the other players we had shortlisted sadly have also been drafted. It looks like all the relievers who are set as starting pitchers for the most part have been drafted. We've still got a few guys left, but this is the point where I think we're going to draft Brad Horde. You just want to make sure that by the third round you're getting your top tier relievers. All right, and a lot of the remaining really good players have been drafted. That includes the fielders. This is definitely one of those things where there are trade-offs to be made. You can't get everybody. You have to make your choices, even with the players that you value more heavily than the AI. It's going to be a little bit of a crunch. I just noticed that Jorge Rivera is impossible to sign, which means I don't want to burn an early draft selection on him. We're going to ignore him now. Now I have everybody that's left on our short list. Ricky Escobedo's interesting to me. David Ramos is easily the best hitter left in the draft class, but Willis Ruiz, in my opinion, has the best overall potential. He's got the possibility to crack the majors, to be an actual starter if he can keep the offensive production going. With low intelligence and at age 20, I'm not counting on that though. I think he's just a good bet to be a very solid utility infielder. Great arm, great range, solid error and turn double plays, and a not bad bat. All right, so at this point, all of the players that we had are still available. I think we're going to take David Ramos. We want to get at least one bat out of this draft class just so we can have him. Ramos is a decent right fielder or left fielder. His work ethic is solid. He's a decent bet to be a borderline major leaguer. Okay. Alexis Duran is interesting to me at this point. Mike Mosqueda is certainly very interesting. I think we're just going to go with Alex Duran. Want to make sure that we're getting our quality batters, all around hitter profiles while we still can. Nate Carter, I think, is a good selection at this point. And there goes Pat Lee. We'll get Mike Mosqueda now. I really love that personality. We're actually going to talk about the leader work ethic intelligence combo as a primary target for players to draft in a minute here. All right, Sam Cameron probably has the best chance of making the majors of all of our guys left here on the short list. And Chris Clement, I don't know. I'm not a fan. Oh, wait, he's an infielder, isn't he? Okay, that makes him a little more appealing to me, but I still think we're going to leave it at this for now. So the next thing we're going to talk about, I will first take a quick look at the best players still remaining in the draft. This is usually going to be relievers. We've got a couple at the top here by overall. And these guys could make the major leagues. I think Chris Brown, probably the best. I like the work ethic on him. Tony Villagrana, not too far behind either. I think these are both solid selections. We'll see if we can't get them both. He probably gets taken. Yeah. And now we're just left with 2-star players. That's not a surprise. So you can go through, look for the best hitters left, the best pitchers left, the best fielders left. But instead, what I'm going to do, just for the sake of showing you guys this strategy, is look at personalities. So I have a preset filter for this. I recommend you get one too. Intelligence, work ethic, and leader ability all high. The intelligence and work ethic being high is going to help that individual player develop. The leader ability being high will help your whole system develop. At this point, you're unlikely to see too many game-changing talents, so again, I kind of recommend that you go after some of those guys before you go after this type of player. But these are guys who could develop into really solid stars, and they're going to be great clubhouse presence everywhere they go. So Grant Randall, outstanding personality. He could potentially crack the majors as a utility guy if he can really improve something. Not the best player, but certainly worth taking, especially for that personality. Nick Seaman, low loyalty and adaptability, that's not a problem. He is a few TCRs away from being a viable major leaguer. He's young, he's got great personality, love that work ethic, leader, intelligence. Definitely a type of player that I think could be a stable major leaguer with a little bit of improvement. Brenton Davis. He's a catcher, but it looks like he's not really a catcher. He's got some infield ratings. I guess he could just be a really weird utility guy. That's probably my assessment of him. Ari Gordon, outstanding personality. Some TCRs are going to be needed, a little old for them, but nonetheless interesting. Brock Mathis, another exceptional personality, but not a great catcher. Ironic because his name is Mathis, but he could potentially work out as like a first baseman, maybe emergency third baseman, quarter outfielder. And lastly, we've got Tyler Stout. This is a player I think has the best overall potential left. He could possibly be a long relief guy in the majors with a little bit of improvement. And then we're just going to take them youngest to oldest, all the players who are left, because there's essentially no chance that any of them are drafted before we get them. And at this point, we'll just say that all of the meaningful talent in the draft is gone. Now, at this point, it's not too big of a deal if you just want to auto draft. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you. But if you want to really ink every ounce out of this draft that you possibly can, I recommend just sorting by leader ability is high. These are the types of players that are going to improve the clubhouse and overall just make it a better development environment for your legitimate prospects. So just sort by leader ability, take the best personalities and or talents that you see, and maybe you can get some value out of them. So somebody like Hunter Fitzgerald, he's got some interesting power. He can play third base in the minors, no problem. He can play a corner outfield spot in the minors, no problem. That personality is really going to sell me on him because he will help everybody else and make sure my minor leagues are overall better developing. All right, we got some interesting players here. I like Connor Manuis. This is a guy who's a borderline major league talent. Again, those weaker relievers, they're September call-ups. They're guys who fill in for injuries. They're not bad, and certainly guys who can go up to AAA and be good presences there. Now, at this point, we are going to end the draft and get to negotiations. I hope that all of these tips on how to select players in the draft was helpful. Keep in mind that is just a huge crapshoot after the first few rounds. Anybody who makes the majors at that point is just lucky. You're not talented enough to make the majors basically after the first few rounds. All right. So negotiating with players. I generally recommend you've got your slot column, you've got your demand column. I recommend just offering all your players their demand. You're going to be guaranteed to sign them. I've never had a player not sign when I offer them their demand. And in the case of literally everyone here but Hicks, you're saving money. He is the only guy who has a demand higher than his slot value, and just with blocker alone, that more than covers it. So you're saving a lot of money on the draft. But again, this is a place where you want to spend as much money as you need to just to ensure you're getting the top talents. It's like the international amateur signing period. You don't want to let a top talent slip through your fingers because you weren't willing to put out the money to sign them. That doesn't make sense to me. Now, if you are broke, let's say for whatever reason, we don't have enough money to sign Alex Duran, and we really want to sign Alex Duran, what we're going to do is go to our front office, we're going to find a player who's expensive, and we're going to trade him away. And if we really need desperately to get this player, we really need that extra money. What we're going to do is find a rich team like the New York Yankees. We're going to trade him over to there for cash so that we're definitely going to have enough money to sign our top players. And this is a tip I would recommend doing for your international signing periods as well. It's going to allow you to get the resources you need to make sure you're getting the top players. So very important to do this. Make sure you're getting cash. Make sure you're getting enough resources to sign those top players. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for me on this video. I hope this was helpful in you guys building up your top tier organizations, getting that high end talent, and making sure you've got solid depth throughout as well. Let me know if you've got any questions. I'm more than happy to help, and I'll see you guys next time.